Welcome back, everybody, to Fire Emblem. We're doing the hard mission. I hate this mission. Hope you all die. Got a lot of bullshit we gotta get done. So as my very rude, very obnoxious teacher that I don't think lasted very long. Of course I don't know, because it was a different time period, but sit down, shut up, we gotta go. No, I'm joking. I never had a teacher like that. I did have a bus driver in elementary school, like I was in kindergarten or something, but that was his catchphrase, was sit down, shut up. And he either got let go or they moved him to a different bus route or something. I don't know. Bunch of little 6-year-olds being little shits on the way home. I would imagine so. Either that or, you know, there's a good chance this guy's been dealing with fucking teenagers. High school age teenagers being assholes for 15 years and just fucking tired of it. I mean, I get it. You know, get them while they're young. Teach them the rules. Sit down, shut up. Of course, you did that today, you'd be fired on the spot. For the most part. I think you'd have to use an expletive in there. Probably. Who knows? You definitely get reprimanded anyways for doing that. That's not nice. That's not nice to talk to elementary schoolers like that. Oh my god. So, for those who care, which is going to be maybe 1 or 2 people, video is coming out late. This video is coming out late because, as you may remember from previous video, I went to my uncle's funeral this week. It was on Friday. I thought I had enough videos to get me through till Monday. Turns out I was 1 short, so I lost. The funeral was on Friday, so the viewing was on Thursday. So I lost Thursday after work. I lost Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Thursday, Friday. Those are 2 recording days from, you know, those are 2 days where I sort of make sure that everything's sort of sewed up until next week, like Monday, Tuesday sewed up. But I didn't do that, so I found out today at about 3 o'clock that I didn't have any videos posting. I was like, did I forget to post something? And it's like, yep, you forgot to post completely, Christopher, so yeah. So I'm gonna get a couple videos done here today. And then, we'll be good, hopefully, for a couple days. I'll have to do a better job of recording this week. So I get a little bit ahead of myself again. Because like I said, I lost Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for recording. Obviously the later days, Saturday, Sunday, that was more of a, hey, it's the weekend thing. You know, go spend some time with your family, you know, talk to people, you know, in your neighborhood, do your laundry, try to come to grips with the fact that we're all gonna die one day, and that fucking scares the shit out of me, and I don't like to think about it, particularly when I'm trying to go to sleep. So yeah, hooray. There's a Charlie Brown line that I'm often reminded of when stuff in my life changes. It's kind of a depressing line, as many Charlie Brown lines are very depressing. Some of his best known stuff, like, you know, why can't I do anything right, sort of thing. Despite the Charlie Brown sort of also that character that is always looking on the bright side, even though his life is kind of like shit. His friends kind of treat him like shit, and he's very unlucky, but he's always trying to look on the brighter side, like, even though he never won a baseball game until close to when Schultz retired, maybe about a decade or so before he retired, did he finally give Charlie Brown the hero role, you know, where he bottom of the 9th, they're down by 1 run, and Charlie Brown hits it over the fucking center field fence to win the game, you know. Which I remember because my dad been reading Peanuts probably is long before I was born, definitely, but he'd been reading Peanuts probably his whole fucking life. And year after year there would be the section of baseball where Schultz would talk about baseball, and inevitably Charlie Brown would lose all of his games, because if you looked at his team wasn't really, the team wasn't there. There were not a lot of people that seemed to be very interested in playing the game, let alone winning. And that was sort of the humorous part of it, is you're playing with your neighborhood kids, and some of them are playing because they want to be social, but they're not playing necessarily because they want, they enjoy the sport. Hard to say. Anyways, Charlie Brown has this line where he goes, and it's in the one where you learn, I guess, I never read enough of the comics for me to tell you whether or not this is part of the comic run or not, but there's an episode where they talk about Snoopy's background, where he came from. He came from this puppy mill. And he's got whatever, I can't even remember. He's got like 9 brothers and sisters or something ridiculous like that. He's a dog. Okay, you get that. And I think there's a part in that, I think it's that special, where Charlie Brown laments, after it appears like Snoopy is going to leave him to go back to his original owner, that he's had too many goodbyes and not enough hellos. And I understand very much now that I'm you can understand it even as a little kid, but I want to say as someone who's less emotional than I was as a child or a teenager, I can very much understand that for every hello, there's going to inevitably be a goodbye. And for every, it's the whole, the balance thing. For every sunrise, there's a sunset. For every morning, there is an afternoon. For every afternoon, there's an evening. It's just the flow of time. But particularly as I get older and things change, it always feels like I've had to have way too many goodbyes and not enough hellos in this world. And again, that's, for me, that's a little bit of the belly button looking thing, where you need to kind of get your head out of your ass and focus on the here and now, because ultimately people are going to continue to come into your life. They're going to leave your life. They're going to leave your life either via, changing jobs, moving areas. Some of them are going to, you're going to just stop seeing them at some point, either because you've changed jobs, they've changed jobs, they moved out of the area, but you're going to have people that are going to come into your life as well. They're going to move into your area. They're going to move into your life. And you just have to kind of focus on the hellos more than the goodbyes. I know my grandmother was my grandmother on my dad's side was a very sociable lady. So she had a lot of friends that passed away, but in saying that, she had a lot of friends as well. So, and part of life, I guess, something that I maybe should learn a little bit better is, you can just try to do the best you can. There's, your life does not have to be super complicated. I understand in this day and age, particularly with the idea of capitalism, and you can't even really, you can blame capitalism to a little bit, but it's really the culture, that feeds into capitalism a lot, at least the United States, is, well, you should, look at this person over here. They're 12 years old. They're graduating high school and is a future, pianist, member of Juilliard, composer. And those people are so rare because you have, at the end of the day, you have to get enjoyment out of what you're doing. So as a person who's you know, able to maybe pick up stuff quicker than others, or more dedicated to a particular art or science, they're more likely to succeed. And then in the same thing in the long run, you might say, well, this guy is a literary genius, or this guy's a literary prodigy. Well, does he or she like doing this? That's the first question. Because if they like doing it, great, then you're probably going to see more from them in the future. If they don't like it, it's probably going to be sort of a one-off thing, and you're going to hear this, you know, the whole sad tale about, well, whatever happened to XYZ guy? You know, there's some peer pressure in there as well, particularly if you're talking actresses. But I was making a larger point here, and I diverted again and can't remember what I was trying to say. In any case, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, you know, you gotta kind of live your life to the best of your ability and not worry about what everybody else is doing. And while I'm a big proponent or a big advocate for making little progress every day, getting a little bit better, doing a little bit more every day, you know, so that, you know, instead of trying to climb the mountain in one step, you're doing it step by step to get there. And you're going to stumble and you're going to fall a little bit, and that's part of the process. And, you know, you want to be cautious to a degree so that, you know, you're not accidentally falling down a mine shaft or something, or into a ravine, if you will. But at the same time, like, it's okay to take your time. It's okay to maybe look at the goals that you have in life and realize that, you know, you don't need to be the superstar. You know, there are other things you can do with your life, you know, that don't necessarily require you to be the best there ever was, you know? And, you know, I sometimes refer to East Asian cultures when I talk about stuff like this, because the Western ideals and Eastern ideals have been they're very opposite of each other, because they were so separated from each other by mountains and tundra and just the sure length between going from, say, a China that's mostly based on the eastern side of the country, and Europe, which is sort of its tail opposite. It's so far removed from that Eastern influence that the two don't intermingle, is what I'm trying to say. So you get completely different philosophies on things. And because you have China, who, I guess, if you want to, I kind of look at it this way, it seems like they got a head start on culture a little bit, because the nature of the rivers in China, and, you know, the areas for growing food and having transportation and getting to the sea, you know, was more advantageous for them, because they had a secure, very stable set of water, you know, water being, of course, important for life. That's where all the ancient civilizations popped up from, at least as far as history can tell us anyways. So the Middle East, you have a very stable temperature, you have a very stable source of water, and from there, civilization's able to thrive along those rivers. But the difference again between, I don't know enough about East Asian culture, history, to really talk about this in depth, but I feel like the difference is, and again, this has to do with how do you survive? How do you survive? Does individuality allow you to survive? You're more likely to survive as an individual or as a collective. And yes, I understand there's a stretch there between well, yeah, if only I have to make food for myself, I only have to make this amount of food. And I only have to gather this amount of resources. I only have to have this amount of house to stay alive. And when I add a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter, then that has to grow a little bit. I mean, the initial space, I mean, all of it has to grow a little bit, okay? But when you're reliant on each other so that I produce enough grain so that my community survives, you know, you start becoming more community-centric versus individually-centric. And I think that very much is one of the obviously big things about the difference between Western and Eastern culture is, are you more culturally centered, as in my life does not as an individual matter, or is it more of a only I matter? The collective is secondary to the individual. If the collective is doing good, then the whole should, or if the individual is doing good, the collective should do good. Whereas the other way around is, if the collective is good, then the individual will prosper because of it. And each one of them ignores key things that you need to survive, obviously. You can do it all, but you're very reliant on, you become very reliant on luck at that point. So you can make your own food, you can hunt, you can, you know, make vegetables and maybe have a cow and milk and, you know, everything you need to survive and make, you know, using the natural resource. But if you have a bad winter, or a fire blows through your area, or there's a famine and the deer or animals don't survive, or there's a virus or a plague of some sort that rolls through, you start to become more heavily reliant on the group, the family, the collective. You know, are you better off in the middle of the woods where no one's around, taking care of your own business? Or are you better in a city where you can group together and protect yourself as a group from outside threats? You know, I understand we've sort of very much gotten away from that. A lot of these things with technology and, you know, everything else, I guess. I want to say, you know, medicine and all that, but all that's built not on the backs of a single individual, but on the backs of the community, the whole, the whatever you want to call it. Because while you're focused on surviving, you know, someone else could be focused on medicine, or they could be focused on, you know, making sure you have roads and electricity and the whole 9 yards, inventing new things, discovering new things. But unfortunately, in a lot of East Asian cultures, they take the collectivism a little too far, where I don't know enough about that history too, but I can tell you that it seems like when China, in the past, when China has to make a cultural or civic change, millions of people die. Millions. Like, take the population of China right now, which is over 1 billion, okay? In order for them to make their next major change, it's going to require, obviously, some amount of collective thought about how the current way of doing things, whether that be the government or, you know, handling their economics, or however you want to look at it, however big or small you want to make this change, you know, look at this as. But no one will make the first move because you're more worried about what everybody else around you thinks and what's good for the collective before you think about what's good for yourself, your individual, your community, if you will. Because particularly when you have that many people and your thoughts are being somewhat Um, all of our thoughts are being influenced by everything: news, television, media, people that we work with, people who we're neighbors with. We're all going to be influenced by that, whether we stick to our guns or don't. But I feel like if I have a different opinion than you, I can say it. You might not like it, but you might say, hey, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I don't want to hear you ever again. But I have, at least in America, I have a right to say it. For now, at least. And in a lot of cases, in East Asian cultures, either the culture itself, the people, or the government will monitor what you say and sort of try to push you back towards the group consensus. And it can go anywhere from something that's a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more serious or drastic, like you might say, like a totalitarian regime, or even communist China is not very open to people's dissent and discord, regardless. And even within the Chinese government, what ends up happening is they seem to go in this cycle where there's corruption, then they want to make a change. So in order to make change, someone with enough political willpower is able to start to single out some of the members within the party that are abusing their power, basically take them down, and then reestablish other people that are more like-minded to them to replace them. And it works in both ways. It works for both people who are doing what they think is right, but goes against what is the common thought. And then it also goes the other way, where you are trying to centralize your own power, so you basically get rid of anyone who is a dissenter. You know, someone who thinks differently than you. It has different ideas. You don't want to push that level of, say, progress or something to that extent. And I know it's a political gamble, because if you can't get enough political support behind you, then you are the one who gets purged, not the other way around. What I'm trying to say is, even in Japan, which is more, I would say, more open, more liberal, whatever word you want to use, to, you know, let's people have, you know, at least some input into their day-to-day lives. Even they, you know, a lot of their stories revolve around, well, we're rebelling against society in order to put society back on track. Like, you're trying to make changes to society, but not so much that it actually changes society, more or less reforms it into a more pure form of itself. Or something to that extent. Yeah. Exciting, I know. Very exciting. But, sort of on the opposite end of that spectrum, you have Western influence, which is very... It's a little too self-grandizing, too self-important. And I'm not really sure where... I imagine, for the most part, the Americas, whether it be North or South America, probably fall more into the Western mindset because of how they were colonized. But I'm sort of speaking. There's different levels of it where, because of the way certain places were handled during their colonization and decolonization, you have different levels of what I'll call spoiled or corrupted. I would say, particularly, I want to say from an American perspective, United States of America perspective, based on what I understand of the way things work in Mexico, is that if there's a guy who's kind of like the boss of your area, or like an unofficial governor of your area. And if you want something to get done, you got to make sure that he gets his share. He gets his palms greased in some capacity. And that has something that is very much a leftover remnant of colonialism, where, you know, you had the natives, and you had the people who were over from Europe, and, you know, the Europeans look at the natives as something, as a lesser people, lesser race, a lesser whatever you want to call it. And see if Oswin survives this. I'm curious because I think I'm within range of that. Yes, I am. Okay, he did survive. Good. He didn't do as much damage as I thought he was going to do. So you can ignore my worries there. But being descendants of European / colonization, it's good and bad in a way, because Europe was so divided and not ever unified into a single entity since the fall of the Roman Empire. And even then, you have to think about all of the different barbarian tribes, German barbarian tribes, that were displaced during, you know, some of the incursions from the east into the west, that pushed them into Roman territory, which basically exacerbated the problems that were in the Roman Empire. But because there was no real centralization amongst the cultures, the regions, the only thing that really centralized that area was religion, and even that, at a certain point, was abused to a point that no longer was all of Europe Catholic, but rather they splintered into Lutheran and, you know, Anglican and Reformer churches, and then they split from there. But sort of in order to keep up with the Joneses sort of philosophy, you're always being forced to constantly innovate as a military, as a country, in order so that you do not fall behind economically, militarily, because what would end up happening is if you fell behind, eventually some up-and-coming advanced, or not advanced, but charismatic leader will come in and wage war in Europe that'll, because of, you know, the fact that nobody's really, you can't keep your allies very long term, with some minor exceptions. I think Portugal and England / the United Kingdom has had like a long-standing treaty with Portugal for like 500 or not quite 1,000 years. Obviously, that's much too long, but it's like 600 years or something that they've been allies without any intermittent war. They would, you know, break up what I guess you would call an alliance. We're gonna finish them off now, or at least try to, anyways. Good job. This is blood. It is on your hands. That's correct. Alright, we're going to do a little healing. Get Perso a little extra XP. And then we'll cut the episode here. But I'll finish my thought while we're working on this. So basically, you're being forced to either keep up or possibly get invaded. And if you get invaded, then there's a different problem that causes sort of that homeostasis that is Europe. But But you basically, what would happen is you would have a country like France, and they would get militaristic, like during Napoleon, and they would expand out, and then there would be a coalition war because, again, someone was getting too powerful in Europe, so let's all gang up and beat them up, and then they'll basically fall apart, and then there'll be another, in whatever, 20 years or so, there'll be another war, whether it be a coalition war or a war to try to gain territory or to limit someone's power or whatever. And it just continued until roughly World War II. I'm saying roughly World War II because it depends on what part of Europe you're talking about. If you're talking about the Balkans fucking exploded, fell apart, you know. Russia had its, you know, client states for a while. That fell apart. Now they seem to they're trying to get back to that, where they're trying to establish Ukraine and Belarus as kind of like puppet states, client states, that they can use as sort of a buffer in case for some reason someone in Poland or Germany or any of those other border states suddenly go nuts and decide, hey, we're going to invade Russia because it's just an open plain from here to Moscow, which is ultimately, I understand, their real fear is this long, unabated plain of just flat land that you can just roll across, particularly with tanks, but, you know, obviously other motorized vehicles, airplanes, the like. So, I talked about like 14 things in this episode. Right now what we're looking for is we're looking for the steepered area. It's around here somewhere. Not in the tree. Probably around that tree though. Trying to look around. It's in one of like a couple places. Either up in this area or it's down by that tree that I just checked. So, everything else looks like cleaned up. And let's just see if we can heal anybody. Not really going to worry about this too much. Yep, we're just going to heal a couple people and then that'll be it. I'm going to find as soon as I find the secret area, in a turn or two, that'll be it. Not going to waste too many turns on this. It should be right around this area where I have my thief. We'll bring you down in the hopes that maybe I can heal someone else up. Sarah, I'm going to not give you any more experience because I'm not planning on using you. I'm really kind of... There's like a couple characters I'm really regretting using. And... because they're just not my cup of tea, is I guess how I should put it. There it is. And that would be Guy and Dorcas. I can't stand them for some reason. They just seem to get the wrong stats that just drive me nuts. Alright, we're gonna buy a physic. We're gonna probably skip on the iron blades. I don't need another unlock. And the silver card allows me to buy stuff at the same price that I sell it at. So that's the end of this episode.